Good day, everybody. I am Mr. Pepito, and together with me for this course learning outcome is Miss Hinugin, and today we will be explaining Patricia Benner's novice to expert theory and the things that are involved, such as the levels of nursing experience. So, to start, we have the novice, or the first year of education. The novice stage of skill acquisition occurs in areas on which the student has no experiential background to base approach or understanding of the clinical situation. So, an example of that is the art and skill of a range of medical and nursing interventions on particular patients will be new. So, pretty much they won't have any idea or they will need absolute guidance in most of the stuff that they'll be doing in nursing practice. The educator must offer good descriptions of features and attributes of the situation that the novice can recognize. So, for example, to determine fluid balance, students are given clear parameters and guidelines. So, you can see this back when we were in first year in our FN or our fundamental subject during our RLE procedures. We were given parameters and guidelines for our return demonstrations. Next, the instructor forecasts for the student what he or she should expect, and students typically rely on standard nursing care plans to guide their planned care activities. Uh, Novices have only a very limited ability to forecast futures because of the student's lack of experience with other patients. Usually, the student must rely on textbook forecasts. So, this is why we do or we make or formulate nursing care plans during duties and other school activities that may need them, as this helps us understand more in how we tailor make um, care plans for specific patients. So we're not really that experienced yet, so of course we rely on our textbooks, like for example the Nanda and our drug handbook. Next would be the advanced beginner or the new graduate, which is us pretty soon in God's name. The newly graduated nurse has usually functioned very close to the level of a beginning staff nurse in his or her final year of nursing education. So, this is why we have such a thing in fourth year, such as the intensive nursing practicum. So, at that point, during our duties, we no longer have um, clinical instructors supervising our actions. Instead, we actually have a real floor or staff nurse that we tail around the hospital. So they no longer feel that they can always look to other nurses to tell them what to do or to bear their responsibility. The advanced beginner has a heightened awareness of any feedback on performance and pays close attention to the practice of colleagues. He or she actively searches for credible sources of good and useful information. In coaching an advanced beginner, strategies for keeping anxiety at bay and staying calm enhance performance capacity because the anxiety is so general. Next is the competent stage, or 1 to 2 years in practice. The competent stage of skill acquisition is typically a time of heightened planning for what are now more predictable immediate futures. The competent nurse now decides what is more or less important based on informal yardsticks learned from past experiences with other patients. The competent nurse tries to limit the unexpected through planning and analysis and by forecasting the needs and contingencies of the immediate future. But he or she realizes that there are no rules to help him or her do it. Anxiety is now more tailored to the situation than it was at the novice or advanced beginner stage, when a general anxiety exists over learning and performing well without making mistakes. Coaching at this point should encourage competent level nurses to follow through on a sense that things are not as usual, or even on vague feelings of foreboding or anxiety, because they have to learn to decide what is relevant with no rules to guide them. So basically, their clinical judgment is sharpened at this point in time, the competent stage. Encountering incompetence and a lack of social integration and informal coaching in the particular clinical unit aggravates the inability to trust colleagues. So that concludes my part. Thank you.
To continue, by the way, I am Ms. Sinugin. So for the proficient stage, it takes 3 to 5 years in practice. During this stage, the proficient nurse or administrator has a holistic understanding of the situation at hand, which allows for a more improved decision-making process. The nurse must literally learn to situate himself or herself differently in relation to his or her work. And at this stage, first person experience near narratives often take the form of describing changes in the perspective of a situation. The nurse perceives the information as a whole or total picture rather than in terms of aspects and performance. So, in the proficient level, it is a qualitative leap beyond the competent. So, the nurses at this level demonstrate a new ability to see changing relevance in situation, including the recognition and the implementation of skilled responses to the situation as it evolves. Lastly is the expert stage, which takes 5 years or more in practice. So the expert nurse is response-based in using technique and phronosis. The expert can now integrate his or her grasp of the situation with his or her responses. So, the expert individual has an extensive knowledge of situations that allows for confidence and an intuitive grasp of complex patient situations. So, the rules, guidelines, and maxims are no longer relied upon during the expert stage because the individual is able to grasp the situation and understand what needs to be accomplished at this point.
Hello everyone, I am Zarina May Lorente and I'm going to report CLO number 5, which is to enumerate the different job leads. So starting off with the contact database. Your cell phone holds more than just your favorite numbers. So there will be people there you haven't gotten in touch with for months, if not years, so you probably forget about them. Page through your contact database from start to finish. Just because you haven't spoken to someone recently doesn't mean you can't reconnect and recover that dormant relationship. You may already know in people in your target companies. Next is resume. Your resume lists your schools, past work experience, and activities. So use it to jog your memory of additional people you are connected to that you might have fallen out of touch with. We also have number 3, which is the networking. Networking is a communicating with people you know or meet to share information and advice about jobs. We also have employment agency. This is a business that matches job seekers with job openings. We also have the hot call. This is a call to a specific person or to get specific job information, such as a call to follow up a referral or job lead. We also have cold call. This is a phone call to a prospective employer with whom you have no prior contact. And we have the phone list. This is a written document used to help you prepare what you might say when you're making a cold call. Recruiters and HR. Identify the recruiters and HR people in your network. Even when they are not affiliated with your target companies or industry, they can still fill you in on hiring trends. And lastly, we have the friends and family. Don't discount non-professional, social connections like friends and family. Make sure you keep them updated on the companies and roles you're going for. Mentioning company may spark a connection, like your friend does know someone who can be helpful. So that is all for the different job leads, and again, thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, my name is Mara Kathleen Matulak and I'm going to report the CLO number 6, which is to develop the skill to produce a written job output. So the first skill that I am going to discuss is the communication skill. So in order for a person to improve his or her communication skill, he or she should read documents written in standard English text, like for example, the administrative policy manuals. Also, he or she should write technical reports that are suitable for publication in professional journals. Speak simple sentences. Speak on a one-to-one basis using appropriate vocabulary and grammar to obtain information and explain policies, procedures, and more. And lastly, to speak with persons of various social, cultural, economic, and educational backgrounds to practice his communication skills. So the second skill that I am going to discuss is the planning and research skill. So for someone to embody this skill, he or she has to plan, organize, manage, and complete tasks or projects effectively while meeting the deadlines. Utilizing the time management and organizational skills effectively in producing quality work in a professional environment. It involves the following. First, setting goals and managing priorities to meet established objectives, outcomes, and deadlines. And second, demonstrating an ability to organize and carry out multiple tasks or projects at the same time. Also, one has to critically identify, gather, and organize relevant information to be utilized in first, identifying reliable sources of good information and data, second, determining the suitability of information for projects or research, and lastly, in organizing information and data using appropriate technology and methodology. So the third skill that I am going to discuss is the analytical skills. So one has to systematically arrange data into groups or categories according to established criteria, analyze information, problems, situations, practices, or procedures in order to first, define the problem or objective, second, to identify relevant concerns or factors, third, is to identify patterns, tendencies, and relationships, four, formulate logical and objective conclusions. Fifth, to recognize alternatives and their implications. Also, to analyze complex technical data such as using logic and quantitative reasoning. Also, to organize material, information, and or people in a systematic way to optimize efficiency and minimize duplication of effort. And lastly, to coordinate with people, resources, projects, and etc. by determining the time, place, and sequence of actions to be taken on the basis of analysis of data. The fourth skill is the vocational skills. So for someone to embody this skill, he or she has to show demonstrated skill in using software applications to produce business letters and financial reports, a demonstrated journalistic abilities sufficient to write news releases and other PR materials for consumer, professional, and trade outlets in print, broadcast, and online media. And lastly, a demonstrated experience in managing strategies for successful cultivation and solicitation of annual and manual gifts with special attention to laws and familiarity with the discipline's terminology. So the fifth skill is the interpersonal skills. So one has to negotiate or exchange ideas, information, and opinions with others to formulate policies and programs and or to arrive jointly at decisions, conclusions, or solutions. Also to interact diplomatically with the public in a continuous public contact setting, and lastly, to maintain equanimity in the face of resistance or contrary opinions. The sixth skill is the financial skills. So one has to have knowledge of general and fund accounting and business practices to effectively manage the budgets. And one has to develop creative financial solutions and make projections using present and future values, loan computations, and annuity calculations. Last but not the least is the self-management skills. So one has to perform effectively in environments with frequent workload changes and competing demands, perform repetitive work according to set procedures, perform effectively under conditions of fluctuating workload, set priorities which accurately reflect the relative importance of job responsibilities, prioritize assignments to complete work in a timely manner, work independently and follow through on assignments with minimal direction, and to take actions when answers to a problem are not readily apparent in equivocal circumstances.
Good day, everyone. I'm Jen Nazario, and I will be discussing SIL 07, which is to identify the effective ways to prepare for a job interview. First is wear proper attire for the interview. For the men, Wear solid color or conservative suit, white long sleeve shirt, conservative tie, belt, dark socks, properly neat hairstyle, neatly trimmed nails, portfolio or briefcase, and lastly, leather shoes. For the woman, wear conservative suit, coordinated blouse, dark shoes, jewelry in moderation, properly neat hairstyle, hosiery at or near skin color, sparse makeup and perfume, manicured nails, short, and lastly, portfolio or briefcase. And always remember, do not use a backpack during the interview. Next is become familiar with the company or research the organization. Next, have multiple copies of your resume and organize them. And always remember to study your resume and know everything about it. Next, practice your answers to the most common interview questions. Do not wholly memorize your answers, but have a clear idea of what you are going to say. And lastly, do not be late. Give yourself extra 20 minutes before the job interview.